Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we have to talk about the 2024 F-150 because we actually already have some big updates for the F-150. Before getting this video though, as always, if you can save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below, and if you can see more content just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post videos every single day. Let's get into it. So first off, it's kind of strange that Ford is already releasing a refresh version of their F-150 because they just released a new F-150 and they released it during a time where supply is super constrained, and so there's a lot of people that want the new F-150 that still haven't had a chance to get one, and so yeah, it's definitely an odd choice by Ford. But if you look at everything else that's happening out in the world and what Ford has done historically, it actually makes quite a bit of sense. So with Ram, they're releasing a pretty, updated version of their truck for the 23 model year. When I say pretty updated, it's had several updates over its lifespan since the 2019 model year that it was released in. And so, a 2023 compared to a 2019, there's a pretty big difference. And we're also going to be getting a new powertrain with the Ram 1500 pretty soon. And so that's just going to make it, a lot more appealing to, buyers and, potentially pulling buyers from Ford. And then with General Motors, they, obviously released their trucks brand new for the 2019 model year. And then they just did a heavy refresh for the 2022 model year. And so their trucks are looking bright and shiny. And so Ford's like, yep, we got to make some changes so that we can, keep up with General Motors and with Ram, or, just at least, make it look like they have the shiniest, newest truck on the market. And so that's where these changes come from. And then also historically, if you look at the last generation of Ford F-150, from the 2015 to 2017 model year, you had a certain look on the Ford F-150. And then for 2018, they did a refresh until that lasted until 2020. And then obviously they did the redesign for 2021. And so, this is right in line in terms of the time frame with what Ford normally does with the F-150 to do a refresh. Now, in terms of what is actually changing on the truck, several things. So just like the 2018 refresh, we're getting new headlights and taillights with this F-150 just to give it a fresh face to differentiate it from the 2021 to 2023 Ford F-150. And then also a potential new bumper design front and rear with certain packages, and then also new grille design as well. Again, just, everything that Ford can do that's pretty inexpensive to do to differentiate it from the last version. But it's still, ultimately is a refresh, so it's going to be on the same platform. And a lot of stuff is going to remain unchanged. And speaking of unchanged, that leads us into the powertrain side of things. So Ford is most likely going to continue to offer all the powertrains that they currently offer, but they might add a new powertrain. So the one thing that is missing from the F-150 lineup is a plug-in hybrid, because they literally have everything right now. They have naturally aspirated gas engines, they've got turbocharged engines, they have a traditional hybrid, and then you got the F-150 Lightning, which is fully electric. They don't have a plug-in hybrid though, and that's a huge market gap. And so Ford is surely working on something, and with a refreshed F-150, it's a perfect time to release a plug-in hybrid. Now, in terms of the specs, it's too soon to tell, but judging by what the Power Boost produces, I think it's pretty safe to assume that a plug-in hybrid version would have a little bit more power. So the Power Boost is 430 horsepower and then 570 pound-feet of torque. So a plug-in hybrid version, probably at least 450, maybe 460 for the horsepower, and then over 600 pound-feet of torque. And then if it wants to be competitive and when it comes to electric range with most other plug-in hybrids in the market, then expect 30 to 40 miles of driving range, which would be huge for a pickup truck. Obviously, towing, it's going to be negligible because it's going to be like non-existent when it comes to range. But that's why you have the gas motor to support things and help things out. And I think this would be a really smart move by Ford, frankly, because it would help convert more people to the F-150 Lightning in the future, because it would be an easier transition for people, because expecting people to go from a regular, ICE truck to an electric truck, that's a huge step, especially since, well, the Lightning's been shown to have a horrible range while towing and horrible range in the cold as well. And so, again, it would kind of help people get used to that EV lifestyle if they're able to, live with a plug-in hybrid, because, a lot of people are going to be like, wow, I can get 30, 40, whatever it ends up being, I can get 30, 40 miles of range and just charge it at home overnight, and I don't have to use gas in my regular commute. And then, maybe that gets them in the mindset of, maybe I'd never want to have to fill up with gas again, and then they, again, go fully electric. Now, moving on from that to the interior changes with the truck. The interior is mostly going to remain unchanged. However, a common theme with automakers in today's market is changing gauge clusters and infotainment systems, because those are two big centerpieces on vehicles, and frankly, pretty easy to change. So Ford is going to release some updates for the infotainment system just to make it look a little bit more modern and have, more modern features as well, and potentially some subscription-based features because every single automaker is going down that route. And then with the gauge cluster, basically just throw in more functionality. So like if you look at the gauge cluster for like a new Audi or a new Mercedes, it's basically like a second infotainment system. Now the digital gauge cluster with the current F-150, it's really good, but it's not quite a second infotainment system. And so Ford is going to, integrate more UI to kind of make it more on that level, and frankly to compete with Ram, because Ram's new gauge cluster is kind of more like an Audi or Mercedes gauge cluster where you can do like a full navigation screen within the gauge itself, for example. So Ford obviously is going to want to keep up with that. We might also finally get a camera mirror, and I mean this is a long time coming, because Chevy was the first one to release a camera mirror in their or not Chevy, General Motors rather, in their trucks, and then Ram came in second, and Ford, we still don't have anything yet, but 2024 sounds like the year that we will finally get that as an option. Now, when it comes to my personal thoughts on these changes and if I think that it's worth it for you guys to wait for this truck, I think ultimately it depends. Obviously, if Ford releases that plug-in hybrid powertrain, that's something that you're interested in, then yeah, obviously it's definitely worth waiting. But powertrain aside, it ultimately is a refresh. It's not a full redesign, so it's going to be the same truck. Yes, it'll have a fresh face. Yes, the interior will look slightly different, but it'll still be, this generation of F-150 that we've already experienced. So like, don't expect the driving experience to drastically change. Just expect, maybe your gauge cluster infotainment system experience to drastically change. And so, what I'd have to say is if you already have an F-150 spec picked out that you really like, I'd probably just go for it now, because, the other thing about this new truck is it will cost more money. That's just what's happening. I obviously make videos talking about the car market, but what I talk about in those videos is the fact that the new car market is not going to come down in price at all. It's just going to continue to get more expensive, as it pretty much always has since the beginning of time. Well, obviously there's sometimes it's gone down, but the point I'm trying to make is it'll be a more expensive truck. If you're wondering where I think prices are going to fall, I would expect that this refresh version of the F-150 is probably going to be at minimum $1,000 to $2,000 more expensive spec to spec compared to a 2023, and it might even be more than that, just because of where the market's going with inflation and everything. And so that obviously will potentially push some people out of the market. And I guess the other thing that might, push you to wait is if some of these features that Ford is going to release in this new truck are a must-have for me. I already mentioned the powertrain, but, maybe you really want a camera mirror. Maybe, you want to wait and see if they do that, full map view in the digital gauge cluster. Maybe that's going to be a must-have for you. So I guess if some of those options are a must-have for you, then yeah, go for it. But if they're not really a must-have for you, then, what's the point in waiting, right? I understand the excitement of having the fresh new product, but it's not always worth it when you have to pay big bucks for it. But let me know what you guys think about the refresh version of the F-150. Do you think that Ford even needs to refresh the F-150? Or do you think that, Ford should just basically keep things the same? And also, how do you think that this would make the F-150 compare to Ram and to General Motors, considering these changes? Do you think that if Ford changes everything that I mentioned and releases a plug-in hybrid powertrain, that the F-150 would then, surely be the top dog, or do you think that Ford needs to do a little bit more to, basically, keep themselves the top dog, or, put themselves as the top dog, at least in your perspective? I just ended that with like the worst thing ever. So that's going to sum things up for today's video. Thank you guys for watching. If you can see more content just like this, like I said, I recommend you subscribe because I post these videos every single day. See ya.